Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video, we're talking about Samhain spells, rituals and magical practices, and everything I'm doing to celebrate the Samhain season. Samhain is probably, let's be honest, it's definitely my favourite of all of the Sabbats. There is something about the spooky season that I just absolutely adore, and I know that many of you do too. Samhain is very special for so many practicing witches. For many, it's the time when they first carried out magical work themselves, and for others, it's simply something that inspired them to learn more about real witches and real witchcraft. And it's also just really cool. For anyone who doesn't already know, I have a video on Samhain. I will leave it linked in the description box. But it is a festival that is part of the Wheel of the Year celebrated by some, but not all, witches and pagans. And it aligns with Halloween, a festival that many people are already really familiar with. It's a time where many of us will interact, commune, and appreciate those that we have lost, the spirits of the land, fae, as well as servitors, familiars, ancestors, and generally spirits that we might interact with in our day-to-day and our magical practices. It's a time where the year is starting to get darker and colder. We might want to boost our protections at this time to do some house cleansing, some divinations, and generally it's just the really cozy final harvest festival. I personally really enjoy making the most of the Samhain season with spells and rituals, but not everyone feels up to it. So do remember that you can relax during the Samhain season if that's something that you want. It isn't something where you have to be go, go, go all the time, but I hope there's something in what I'm doing this year that you might find useful for your own magical practice. Up first, we have possibly my favourite bit about all of these Sabbath videos, my altar. I love changing up my altar and I find that it can completely change up the way a room looks and feels. This Samhain, I actually did something different. All of my goddess and god statues, I moved them. They're off this altar. Instead, I have replaced them with a pumpkin and one of my precious skulls. This year, I really wanted to focus on that darker energy, the energy of things that have gone. And so for me, I find that pumpkins are a really interesting representation of this. Not everyone feels the same way. Some people see pumpkins as being really happy and jolly, but I see pumpkins as being part of a tradition that guides spirits onwards. The idea of leaving a candle lit for the spirits during Samhain night was a way of guiding spirits safely. The face on the pumpkin was often used to deter against evil spirits, and so ultimately even pumpkins today still have that kind of spirit association for me. I then also have a deer skull on the other side of this altar, which for me represents all of those animal or non-human spirits that a lot of people do forget at this time of year. Everything else is just dotted around with things that I really enjoy, and if you would like a full breakdown, I'm going to try and put one on my Patreon. And generally, I just love this altar. Every single Sabbath, I say that this is my favourite altar, and I'm going to say it again. I think this one is my favourite altar. I guarantee that the next one that I do in Yule will probably become my favourite, but for right now, this one is my favourite. Now, when it comes to Sabbats, you don't have to set up a Sabbat altar. This is just something I really enjoy doing. It doesn't have to be a big space either. It can be something really little. It can be a shoebox, a temporary altar. It can be your phone background or your computer screensaver. It can be somewhere in a video game. I've heard of lots of people creating Minecraft altars, which I think is really cool, especially when people aren't able to openly and publicly share their magical practice. Perhaps they live in a space with family and friends that wouldn't appreciate it, or would perhaps even go further and have some negative consequences on your life. You don't have to set up an altar, but it is a good way of enjoying that season. You can also simply wear the colours of that season and enjoy it in slightly different ways by lighting a candle or two, perhaps some incense that you really enjoy for the Samhain season. Now, Sabbat altars aren't the only altars that are set up at this time of year. You also have Ancestor Altars. Now, I have a full video on Ancestor Altars. I will leave it linked in the description box. That is going to go far more in depth than what I will here. But when it comes to connecting with spirits and ancestors, this is something that many people decide to do. This might be for the known or the unknown dead, those being ancestors that you know personally, and ancestors that you perhaps don't even know the name of or their face. You just know that they must have existed for you to exist. These don't have to be blood relatives either. They could be friends, family, things that have shaped who you are as a person that you consider to be your ancestors in your mind and in your emotions, not just in your blood, which I think is really important to clarify because a lot of people think they can't work with ancestors if they don't know them directly. Ancestor altars are commonly set up at Samhain, and for some people they're temporary. But for many people around the world, they are permanent fixtures in their spirituality and also in their home and day-to-day lives. Ancestors are always present. They are there watching over us, observing us, and for many, they will help aid you in things that you are struggling with. Many people will work with ancestors through communication as well, which I'm going to be talking briefly about later, but I wanted to include this point just to say, ancestors are not just for Halloween, they are for the entire year round. If you're going to work with ancestors, be dedicated to working with ancestors. I would say make it a significant thing that you do every single week to give an offering or to connect with them so that you aren't just showing up for one day a year and then disappearing again. Because if they are there and they're watching over you all of the time. Spirit work, however, isn't for everyone, and some people want to actively keep spirits out of their space. Perhaps not all spirits, just the negative ones, and Samhain is a really good time to be bolstering up our protections and to also be doing house cleansings. I have found that spirits tend to wander a little bit more at this time of year, and you might find them entering your space where perhaps they wouldn't have before. So if you want to do a good cleansing, I have some videos on house cleansing that I will leave linked in the description box, both with smoke and without. This can help you have a clean, fresh start for what for some people is the new year. For other people, Samhain is simply another celebration and their new year is in January or perhaps at other times of year depending on your tradition. But either way, it can be a really good time to get a fresh start and to renew that energy. So do a house cleansing and then protect after the house cleansing rather than doing it the other way around. Protections can be both on yourself and on the home, but whatever protections you do currently use, it could be worth giving them a bit of a check, perhaps adding up a few temporary protections. You might want to protect liminal space just a little bit more by adding some crystals such as obsidian, smoky quartz and black tourmaline around door frames and windowsills. You might want to wash especially the front door down with some water that's been steeped in some protective herbs. You may also want to bolster your pre-existing protections, as well as putting some sigils on paper for protection and then placing them around doors and windows and making sure that your mirrors are securely locked if that's something that you do actively do. This isn't to say that spirits are going to try and break into your home and wreak havoc, simply that if spirits are not something you want to work with, depending on where you live in the world, you might find that spirit activity is a little bit more heightened than usual, so just take that into consideration. This is also the time of year where we might want to be getting rid of the old to bring in the new. As mentioned, for many witches and pagans, this is their new year. I do this in two main ways. One is with fire and the other is with water. To start with fire, now is a really popular time for bonfires to be carried out, and so it could be good to write down the things that you want to remove on bits of wood that you can then toss into the fire and allow the cleansing properties of the fire element to remove them and burn them up out of your life. This is very similar to what we did in the previous Sabbat video, where we did a balancing ritual. It was very similar but done with candles. That kind of ritual can also be moved over to this season if that's something you are interested in. If you don't have access to a bonfire or cannot do it safely, you can also do this with candles. You can take strips of paper with things that you would like to remove from your life. You can push your energy into them and then set fire to them in the flame, dropping them into a cauldron and then disposing of them accordingly. Of course, only ever do this if you can ensure that you are going to be safe. Make sure you have fire safety equipment, water, extinguishers, all of that stuff on hand, and make sure that you don't burn yourself. But this is really good for getting rid of all of that negativity, the things that you want to remove. The other option, possibly the gentler option, is to use water. This is my preferred technique as it doesn't require any additional items. You can do this in a multitude of ways. I'm going to be talking about three main ones. The technique is the same, the body of water is different. So you can use the ocean. You can also use a river or stream, but it should be slow flowing and it should be safe and accessible. No one should be putting themselves in harm's risk just to be able to do a ritual. Or you might find that while you are attempting to cleanse away unwanted energies, you accidentally just wash yourself away in the process. It is not worth the risk. So always make sure you're being safe. The third option is to use tap or rainwater that has been gathered. You are going to be cupping your hands into a bowl and scooping up a handful of water, whispering all of the things that you want to remove from your life into it, and then allowing that water to return back to the river, the stream, the ocean, or you can just drop it back into the sink again. Ideally, though, you would want to be using that water for something like watering plants so that we can reduce water waste. We can do this as many times as we need for as many different things as we need to remove. You can whisper them all into one bit of water. You can do one whisper into one bit of water, whatever works best for you. And then at the end of it, you thank the water for cleansing away the things that you no longer need, and you leave that space. Now, ideally, I would recommend not wasting mass amounts of water for this. So if you have rainwater collection, for instance, for your garden, use a cup of water that you have taken from a water butt and then use that in your garden after you've whispered into it. So that water is going to use, it's not just being wasted. But you can do this, I suppose, in the shower. If you're already having a shower, then you're doing like a 2-for-1 thing where you are not only showering, but you are also doing your magic as well. October is a hectic month for so many people. It seems as though we've got more work than ever before. People are already preparing for Christmas and Yuletide celebrations, which I'll be honest, I kind of hate. I wish we could enjoy October for being October, but I know that we have to plan things if we're going to celebrate later on in the year. Not only is work manic, but people often find that there's more spiritual drains happening around Samhain and the October season in general, and so it can be really difficult to find balance in our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual lives. And that's why it's really important to take a moment, take a breath, do some meditation, some mindfulness, some contemplation, write in a diary, keep a journal, just generally keep on top of your spiritual and emotional well-being. For me, I like to take just a little bit of time for that maintenance. It doesn't have to be an hour or 2 hours, it can just be 10, 15, 20 minutes. Just a little bit of time to write in a diary, or to sit and think about the things that I need to do, the things that I need to carry out, to plan things out even spiritually on paper so that I don't feel overwhelmed when I come to do it in my physical world. Now, not everyone finds this easy, and so I do want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Aura, for making it easier for so many people. Aura is a mindfulness and sleep app. They're free to get started and they have over 7 million users. They've won the Best of Apple award, and genuinely, I feel lost when I don't use it within my day-to-day life. For me, sleep is the most difficult because my mind is always racing. I am the one that writes at 3:30 in the morning and then wonders why I can't sleep. I can't sleep because I'm writing at 3:30 in the morning. And so I find that taking that little bit of time just before bed massively helps me get off to sleep and to sleep better, which is then really important if you need to be working, if you need to be caring for people, even if you're just going to be doing spiritual work the next day, you need to be well rested. For me, around this season, I enjoy working with their ancestor connection meditations and hypnosis. Don't worry, hypnosis is not as scary as you think it is. You can snap out of it at any time, and it's just a really easy way of getting us into a suitable mindset. They also have so many sleep sounds, mindfulness courses. They even have live coaches if that is something you're interested in, getting more into the life coaching aspect of things. And genuinely, I adore using Aura. They're offering the first 500 people to click the link in the description box a free trial and 25% off your membership. And so a massive thank you to Aura for continuing to support this channel and honestly for creating a platform that I do really enjoy. During our quiet, meditative periods, we might also find that our connection to spirits is heightened. Now, understandably, for some people, this can be really scary and you might want to block it out. So now is a good time to put up protections if that is something you feel like you need. But for some people who would like to develop these deeper spiritual connections, this could be a really great time to start working with that, of pushing back and having those communications with spirits. They might be ancestors, they might be guides, they might be plant allies, familiars, servitors. All of these spirits might be more able and willing to reach out to you during this time of year. Now, it's important for me to point out here that around Samhain, people will often talk about the thinning of the veil. Now, for anyone who isn't already aware, the veil is the perceived divide between the physical world and the spiritual world. This veil isn't a set, solid boundary all of the time. At different times of year, it ebbs and flows. It is something that is more fluid and adaptive. What people have found, however, is that during certain times of year, spirit communication between the world of spirit and the world of the living is easier. These would be around Samhain and Yule, and then also around Beltane and Letha. This isn't going to be the same for everyone everywhere, however, and some people are more sensitive to spirits than others. It isn't that you can only communicate with spirits when the veil is thin, but simply that it might be easier for people to cross over and to communicate through it when it is during these easier and more efficient times. If we start building our spirit communication up now, then it's something that we can continue all year round, and you aren't reliant on any kind of variation in that connection in order to have successful spirit communion. So with that being said, let's talk about how we do this. So everyone has psychic senses. It's just that in some people, they're going to be far more developed than in others. And in some individuals, they will have set senses that are more prevalent than other people might. So for me, when I commune with spirits, most commonly what comes through is a knowing. It is this knowledge that someone is present. And also when I communicate with servitors and my personal spirits, it is very much a knowing. I know what is being expressed. I'm not hearing it, I'm not seeing it, I'm not smelling it, but I know it. And it's distinctly different to my own thoughts. That's just me, however. There are people out there who actively see full body apparitions, and people still who will smell, even taste spirits as well as hearing them. I found that the specific aspects of clair senses and psychic ability will fluctuate over time. For me, there are occasions where visible phenomena is more commonplace than auditory, and vice versa. This is going to vary person to person, time to time, and so it's really good to keep note of your clair senses, your psychic abilities, by writing down anything that you notice that might be considered out of the ordinary. These could be shadows and shades that you're seeing out the corners of your eye. These are known as corner of eye phenomena. You might want to write down any phantom smells that you are getting, any sounds that you are hearing that you cannot find the cause to. Writing all of these things down is a really good way of recognizing whether someone is present in your space. And you might find that when you reach out to the same person time and time again, that you will get the same response back. So for instance, if you're reaching out to your grandmother and you really want to make a connection with her, you might find that the same phantom floral smell comes through every single time. Once is a coincidence, twice is a coincidence, but once you're getting to 4, 5, 6, 10 times, suddenly that might not be so much of a coincidence, and you might not realize it's a pattern if you didn't have it written down. So anytime you have any kind of experience that you perceive as being slightly odd, take a note of it. This is a really good habit to get into, and if you have to start it at Samhain, start it at Samhain. You have to start at some point, right? And now you might find it's easier to make connections. I tend to write these down on the Notes app in my phone, but you can also have some kind of physical notebook, a diary, something like that. Anything that works for you will be appropriate for this. Now, when we want to actually start to reach out and commune with spirits, this is something we can do in so many ways. There are two main techniques for communing with spirits that I wanted to focus on specifically for Samhain, and which one is best for you is really going to depend on what you feel most comfortable doing and perhaps what you think will be most effective. So the first technique is very traditional for Samhain, and that is to leave offerings for spirits. And I do feel a need to reiterate here that not all spirits that you will encounter around Samhain are going to be friendly. That doesn't mean be scared of all spirits that you're likely to encounter. It means just be careful. I learned this the hard way myself. I've experienced some really nasty spirits on Samhain, so please always be safe, both physically and spiritually. So when it comes to offerings for ancestors, a really good place to do this is, as mentioned earlier, an Ancestor Altar. Now, these spaces don't have to be large and they can be temporary, but they can be really good locations to place offerings if that's something that you feel comfortable creating. Now, if you're wanting to give an offering to an ancestor that you do not know, that you do not remember is one of the unknown dead, then you don't necessarily need a full altar. You might just want to place your offering in front of a skull candle, for instance, or just a human skull representation, as this will act as the person that you are wanting to give that offering to. This could be good if you don't want to set up an entire ancestor altar. It gives you just a little space, and also it's not going to be out of the ordinary for people to have skull figures and skull candles out around this time of year. The other way of working with an ancestor is that if they are a member of your known dead, perhaps they were a friend, a family member, a grandparent, a parent, whatever it might be, If you have interacted with them in life, then it could be worth just leaving a place setting for them. If you're having a dinner, for instance, leave a space open for them with some food on that plate and just allow that to be the space that's open for your ancestor. A lot of people will refer to this as a dumb supper. It doesn't have to be a full meal, however. If I wanted to leave an offering for my grandmother, for instance, despite her having never set foot in my house, I would probably set a cup of tea by the side of the other chair in my room, the armchair, and it would be a space where the spirits can come and sit and join me and just be around me, and I can be around them. And that's a much more casual way of doing it, especially useful if you do live in a space where past loved ones have visited. You can just leave a little offering of a drink that they really liked, some food that they really liked, maybe even incense that they really liked, perfume, in the space that they would have been when they were alive. So that's a great way of working with ancestor spirits that is a lot simpler than having a full altar setup. If you want a full altar setup, go for it. It is not something that you necessarily need. Now, if you're working with servitors or familiars, that offering would need to be placed around their spirit house or spirit vessel. That's really easy, hopefully, if you have especially a servitor, because you have created them and therefore you would, hopefully, have a space where you will give offerings. When giving offerings to land wights, genus loci, fae, and nature spirits, it's going to depend on who, what, and where. It's obviously really important to stay safe. A lot of spirits will appreciate energy, time, some will really enjoy dance and music and merriment, and others will prefer physical items, such as blessed water, sweetened milk, cake, honey, these kind of things. If we're leaving a physical offering, however, it's important to take care of nature. A lot of animals that could eat the food might get really ill, especially if they can't digest milk. So it's important that we give offerings carefully, and in some cases we might need to sit by an offering and then take it inside to make sure that no animals become injured. Just bear that in mind when you're choosing offerings. Now, there are so many different kinds of offerings. They vary from food and drink to incense to time to dancing, music, singing, so many options. Do your research on the different spirits, entities, energies, deities that you are working with. Certain deities and spirits will request certain offerings, or it will be written in texts about them, the things that they appreciate, and so it's really important that you do your research. It's also important that if you say you're going to give an offering every single day for a week, you give an offering every single day for a week. I, myself, have fallen victim to this. I'm not perfect. I never said I was. But there have been occasions where I've said to my servitor, hey, I'm going to be giving you an offering every single day for 7 days. Can you do this for me? And then I forget. Or I get sick, and before you know it, you've forgotten to do it, and they're coming knocking and they're like, excuse me, you said that you were going to light a candle for me and you haven't, so I'm not going to work anymore. And essentially they go on strike temporarily until you appease them. So just bear that in mind. If you say you're going to do something, do it, especially when you're giving offerings to the fae. Don't go cold turkey on them. If something is going to come up that's going to stop you from giving offerings, explain that to them. Communication is key in all relationships, including those with spirits. So that's just one technique, a little bit long-winded, perhaps, but that is one technique. This is more something that is going to open up spirit communication. It is letting spirits know that you are aware of their presence, you are open to them, and you want to form that connection. From that point onwards, you might find that further communication develops. And one of the most common ways that communication develops is through meditation, divination, and also through sleep. Now, these techniques are really useful to carry out, or at least to start at Samhain and then progress onwards, because for a lot of people, the mindset is right at this time of year. Spirits are often more likely to want to communicate, but also we are more prepared to communicate because of how the energy of this season feels. Now, I would recommend, if you are getting started with spirit communication, that you have something that represents the spirit you want to commune with. This is incredibly useful as it gives us a physical focal point, which can be something that people are lacking, especially if they're getting started. Now, for this, it's obviously going to depend on the kind of spirit you want to commune with. For this, I'm going to be focusing on plant allies and ancestors. So let's start with ancestors, what a lot of people are perhaps most interested in working with. When we are wanting to commune with them, we need to be having that coming together of energy so that we can form active and intelligent communication, something that we can actually understand instead of being a series of knocks and noises that we cannot put meaning to. So I do find it useful to make a bundle of items that you can either sleep with under your pillow, place under the bed, or hold during meditation and divination. For an ancestor, this could be something that belonged to them, or it could be a small photograph as well as some herbs that aid in representing divination and also psychic abilities. So what you could have is a small pouch inside which you place a small photograph. Now this photograph can just be something you print out, it can be something that you have a Polaroid of, for instance. I would say though, whatever you're using, make it a replica of a photo so you aren't risking damaging possibly a very old photo. Place that small photo inside the bag, and then with that I would also include some mugwort, is really useful for this, and I would also include in a labradorite because for me they really aid in spirit communication. This would then be held, carried, placed under the bed or slept with under the pillow to aid in opening up that communication. So not only are you going to think about them before bed, but you are also going to have a representation of them in that space. If we're doing meditation, divination, or sleep, before you get started, you could reach out and ask a question. This could be simply, are you able to come forwards and join me tonight? Are you able to come forwards and join me for this reading or this meditation? It could be a specific question, or it could be a topic that you would like to gain more information on. Set the scene by stating that first before going to sleep, doing meditation, or doing your divination sessions. Now for the unknown dead, this can be a little bit harder. So instead of the photograph, we're going to be using a hair clipping or a nail clipping that belongs to you, so that goes into that bag to represent your lineage. Now this doesn't have to be your blood family, it is just someone that is going to be intrinsically linked to you, and so that way you can have that in there and use it instead of a photograph. For a plant, really simplistic in comparison, we're simply going to take some parts of that plant that have been ethically and appropriately sourced. If you are wanting to work with a specific plant ally rather than the collective energy of that plant, you're going to want a part of the plant you're wanting to connect with, taken with permission from the plant. If you want a collective plant spirit energy, it can be from any of the plants that are of that energy, as long as it is done in an ethical manner. They are then gathered together, placed in a bag, or gathered together in a bundle, kept under your pillow or under your bed, or used within divination and meditation to act as a connection between you and the plant that you are wanting to connect with. Now, when all of this is done, things can come through in interesting ways. You may be having dreams where you are not the main party in that dream. You are maybe seeing through the eyes of someone else, or perhaps you are watching from a third-person perspective on a scene that is taking place. This might relate to the question or the topic that you asked about. During divination, you might find that you are being told when to stop the cards or when to stop the runes, and you are being informed which to turn over when, where, and which order they need to be in. You might find that during meditations, you are getting images, colours, pictures, these kind of things coming through to you that you do not expect to see, and it's worth taking note of everything. I find though that if you are a beginner, dreams are the easiest place to start, as they are when our psychic defenses are lowest. That being said, as with all kinds of spirit communication, make sure you do have protections available, just to make sure that you aren't going to get yourself into a tricky situation. Now, many of you know one of my favourite things to do for the Sabbats is divination. I find that the short gap between one Sabbat and the next is just enough time to have really successful readings without looking so far in the future that things can get a little bit hazy and a little bit jumbled. This Sabbat, however, I wanted to focus on scrying. Now, I will focus more on scrying in the future, but this is a technique I really wanted to develop further, especially at this time of year. Unlike using tarot, oracle, runes, ogham, pendulums, or really any other form of divination, the tools and techniques that we are using in scrying are designed to amplify our own psychic abilities, and it stops us from relying on tarot books or rune books, textbooks on divination. Instead, we are using our own abilities. Now, in this particular video, I am using an obsidian scrying mirror and a candle, but there are so many different options. The art of scrying is essentially the art of staring aimlessly into a surface or an object for the purpose of allowing subconscious and psychic images to come to the forefront of our mind. Essentially, we're distracting the conscious mind with something to look at, and so the subconscious mind has an easier time coming through. You can use cloud scrying, where you look up at the clouds and you try and find pictures in it. You can fire scry, where you're staring into a candle flame or a bonfire. You can water scry, where you're looking into a body of water or a cauldron of water. You can also use mirror scrying and crystal ball scrying. These are probably the two most famous options, where you're staring into either a black mirror or a crystal ball. Now, I personally prefer black mirrors, and I do have an obsidian mirror, but you can make this with a picture frame, and instead of putting a picture in it, you put just a piece of black paper behind the glass, and you have yourself a really cheap makeshift black mirror. Now, I am using very dim lighting when I am doing this. It's very hard for me to show you how dim the lighting actually is because the camera simply will not pick it up. But the candle flame is positioned in front of that mirror so that as I am looking into the mirror, the space is gently illuminated by that flame. I can also see the candle flame in that mirror. So if I need to focus on the flame in the mirror, I can. It's less likely to hurt my eyes than staring straight at the candle flame itself. Or I can simply use the candle as a little bit of ambient light, so I am not completely in darkness. I can still see the surface of that mirror, and it allows images to come forwards more freely. You could invite spirits into your space at this time to commune with you. This is particularly useful if you don't have a gatekeeper that's going to bring spirits in for you. Instead, it is something that you are going to have to do manually. So as you light that candle, you can say a few words. An option could be that I invite in the spirits of my ancestors, my guides, my familiars, my servitors, and those spirits around that wish me no harm, but wish to commune with me during this time. May you share with me your knowledge and your experiences, and may I share with you, for the duration of this candle flame, some of my energy to aid in your communication. I know it sounds wordy, but you get a lot in there in a short amount of time, and you allow temporarily spirits to enter your space. If you're going to do this, I would very strongly recommend you putting a clause in there about the amount of time that a spirit can spend within your space. Essentially, in those words, as you light that candle, you are saying that for as long as this candle is lit, I will permit you to use some of my energy that you need to communicate with me and no more. And when this candle is gone, those spirits are then separated from you just a little bit, just to give you some breathing room. If you don't have any additional protections in that space, they will still probably be present. That's why it's important to dismiss them at the end as well. But it does give you that little bit of leeway. So you've got that comfort of when that candle goes out. If you ever feel uncomfortable, that candle goes out. And that connection to your energy for spirits that don't already have a default connection is then broken. This scrying session then begins, and we are essentially looking through the surface of that black mirror, that crystal ball, that bowl of water, whatever you are using, and you are allowing the images in your mind to come forwards. These might be colours, shapes, you might see smoke. I have seen full faces in crystal balls before. All of these things are going to vary person to person. And once that session is over, I'd say maybe like 10 minutes. Do it 10 minutes a day, every day for the Samhain season. I wouldn't necessarily be doing it for hours and hours and hours on end. Then take note of everything you've seen, thank all the spirits for their participation in this scrying session, and then blow or snuff that candle out. Counterintuitive for a lot of people perhaps, I like blowing out my scrying candles because I feel like it's a very definitive, all of the energetic connections are being blown away that I have added specifically for the purpose of this scrying session. And any spirit that is too close to me now, that I don't want to be close to me, is now being pushed back by the act of blowing out that candle. Now, not everyone's going to feel comfortable doing that. That is just the way that I do it. So those are all of the Samhain spells and rituals and techniques and practices that I wanted to share in today's video. There are so many different varieties of techniques out there that you can utilize for the Samhain season. These are just the ones that I feel particularly drawn to within my own practice. If you want to learn more about this, I do have a video previously made on Samhain. I will link it up here and it will also be down in the description box. I would love to know what you are doing for Samhain. Are you doing any of these things? Are you doing your own thing? Let me know, and it'll help give me additional inspiration and everyone else as well. If you do enjoy this video, give it a like. It means a lot to me. If you've got any questions, comments, concerns, or video ideas, feel free to post them down in the comment section. And if you do enjoy the content either in this video or on this channel, feel free to subscribe. I try to post magical content every single week. So with that being said, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day. I hope you have an amazing Samhain, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!